Now, you can hardly find any period in human history in which a culture has had no growth in absolute terms, but it's extremely common to find that in a lot of periods the relative growth under foreign rule of a nation, right, it suffers catastrophically. It simply doesn't grow in the at the same rate that it was growing before, and it simply doesn't grow at the same rate as, of course, the occupying population. So when you are comparing that, you have to compare relative growth. And honestly, India was not even doing well before the British. Yes, India still contributed a quarter of the world's economy. This doesn't give the British the right to do any worse, by the way. India still contributed like a quarter of the world's productivity. But guess what? Before 1080, before Muslim rule, the Indian subcontinent, it contributed over a third of the world's productivity, right? Under Islamic rule, you'd notice this: the Muslims actually build a lot of monuments which have no scientific value. The Muslims build a lot of monuments which have no knowledge value. They don't have any value in terms of economics, right? Like there's no bazaars around them, there's no trade and commerce around them. A lot of these are just glorified tombs, right? And in general they have a negative view towards the science and empiricism, and they stopped the introduction of the printing press in India by centuries, because there was, of course, the Ottoman fatwa that the printing press cannot be introduced in India, or rather in any Muslim domain. So India was already kind of fucked, but the British absolutely destroyed the shit out of it. And this is what this guy discusses in this video. Let's see.
The reason why India did not develop like Japan did after World War II is because it was colonized for centuries and plundered for centuries. By the time the British Empire withdrew from India in, what was it, 1947, India was plundered beyond repair, and they hadn't even industrialized because of British colonialism. And you can go down that rabbit hole of the desecration that happened to India over centuries. But essentially, they had never industrialized. So by the time the Brits left, they were basically still in the Stone Age because of colonialism. After World War II, the United States invested billions of dollars into Japan. The only real sanctions that happened to Japan were towards their military. Other than that, they actually had investments from the U.S. So that's why Japan is the way it is now, and that's why India is the way it is now. People use they're frankly racist talking points about how, like...
Yeah, absolutely. Like, the racism against the Japanese was also still huge. And when, let's say, you are a rising power, right? When you are a rising power, you are bound to face racism. Your people are bound to face racism. And now, like, don't say that the British exploiting India and causing these social ills like the untouchability to persist longer than it should have is somehow the fault of Indians themselves, right? And this is why Indians deserve to face racism today, right? Like, this is so crazy when you listen to it. The British destroyed India's economy. India holds on to these practices like untouchability. As a result of that, Indians hold on to untouchability, so they deserve to face even more racism. Like, what the fuck, man? Like, what kind of logic is that?
It's like British shouldn't eat food just because their food lacks seasoning.
Bro, like, be serious. Why is your IQ so low? Why are you behaving so low IQ? You have to contribute something meaningful about this. And honestly, I wouldn't say that it is just the British. You have to consider the fact that the reason there were so many sanctions on India is because for, like, what? 1947, 1950, 1991. For 45 years after India's independence, it was ruled by a dynasty which always wanted to appear as neutral as possible. It did not try to gain any alliances with either Russia or United States. At best, it probably had somewhat positive relations with Russia, and they gave up the Security Council seat because Nehru and his children and his party, they simply wanted to appear good, like the good boy of the world to everyone else, not a great power, and like a moral giant while being an economic dwarf. that people don't understand what it's like to live under foreign rule for essentially 1000 years, right? We lived under foreign rule even after the foreigners left.
Yeah, it was for a millennia. And by the way, if like Nehru side, if the Congress decided to side with United States from the fucking get go, China wouldn't be where it is today, right? China got where it is today because United States wanted a power in Asia
Yo,
that
yo,
was
yo, yo, yo,
very
listen. You, China is such a huge power today because at one point of time, like between the 1970s and the 1990s, if I'm not wrong, and that is where USA's good relationships with Pakistan come from, by the way. Listen. So, at one point of time, China and Russia were at odds, right? In the 1970s and the 80s. So United States used Pakistan to establish good relationships with China, and this pushed China more ahead than it should have, right? India never tried that when it had the chance in the 1960s.
India didn't try. It outrightly and actively rejected it. Why did United States wanted to grow China? Because they wanted something to counter Russia in the Asian Pacific. So they offered Indians. All right, the first offer was to Indians, and our fucking prime minister graciously denied it. So then United States was like, all right, fuck it, we'll just go with China. And at one point, United States was about to nuke China, right? Well, they didn't have nuclear weapons. They were about to nuke China, and two businessmen were like, "Oh no, this place is great to do business, and it's great for cheap labor, and it's great for this, it's great for that." If it was India, this was first offered to India, then it was offered to China, and that's how China is where it is today. Now, there wouldn't be any fucking racism today or whatsoever if it was India which got benefits from United States, and then there would be
Instead,
people
what
like,
do you have?
"Oh bro, but
Instead, today you have, like, in the 21st century, you have India developing into a power now. And the reason you see racism against Indians today is exactly because of that. Chinese, Japanese, they have already faced bouts of racism when their countries were developing, when their countries had initially started having good relationships with the Western people, white people. And Indians are probably the biggest pussies among all of these groups. They're like, oh bro, we have the caste system, bro. Because we have the caste system, we deserve the racism, bro. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You people like you actually not only deserve the caste system, you deserve to be ousted from society altogether. You should be fucking blasted into space and you shouldn't come back here.
no." Then there's like, "Oh bro, we do the same to Biharis." Now, okay, that happens to black people in the United States as well. Do you mean black people should be facing racism in the entire world? Does that give the justification?
Yeah,
I mean,
like these
kind
people
of
are
weird.
crazy, bro. These people are crazy.
Like room temperature IQ, man. Even my
You know,
IQ is
also
enhanced
another
when
thing,
I'm.
also another thing, in India you have this common notion that there are 200 million untouchables. Let's also run this down. 50% of the population, which is so-called Dalit, it's actually the scheduled tribes. They were never part of the caste society to begin with. They never wanted to be part of caste society to begin with, and neither did the Brahmins want them. Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Shudras want them to be part of the caste society either. They were happy being different, and that is the reason they were never part of cities. That is the reason they were culturally behind. That is the reason they made less money. That is the reason the highest jobs that they had was probably trading wood with the armies of the with the Indo-Aryan and Dravidian empires, right? That is the highest jobs that they really had. These people were tribes, and you don't get to say that the Brahmins pushed them out of society. That is just bullshit, guys. Like that is just bullshit. This is we were skunks, but tribals. No, you was not kunks. You did not build cities. You never wanted to be part
Doesn't
of
doesn't
cities, and it's fine. And it's fine because you don't
doesn't
go around, because as long as you don't go around blowing people up for having different gods and different beliefs and different ideas and different ways of life, it's all right. You are still a respectable member of society, and modern India would still try its best to integrate you into its society, right?
Doesn't United States also have like this portion of population Amish, the Amish people who stay away from the modern technology, stay away from the modern United States, and just countryside farm people. Like they are not called like untouchables just because they don't assimilate with modern technology.
Yeah, these people were never really untouchable in that sense. The actual untouchables is the other 50% for one reason or the other. So, if you read any major Hindu law book, you would notice that there is essentially a missing death penalty. So, you have a huge population of criminals who are banished from society, were not killed, whose arm or leg was cut off, and then these guys intermarried, and then they had descendants, and they would generationally do this criminal stuff. They were outcasts from society, and as a result, untouchable. And then you have roughly, like I said, the equivalents of the Nagas in Europe, the Burakamen in Japan, and the Bakijong in Korea, right? These are people who did the menial jobs, and for generations they had no social mobility, but the people in the actual four castes, or at least the upper sections of the Shudras or the middle sections of the Shudras were the highest that you can get when it comes to social mobility. So these guys actually did have mobility. People who say this shit about the caste system have basically no idea about Indian history. They have no idea about these castes, multiple castes who have hundreds of millions in population who were originally Shudra. Then they changed. As long as you have a big city and people forget what your grandfather did, then that's all right. And when you have industrialization, then people who work menial jobs, their children also start getting better opportunities. But here's the thing: India didn't get the opportunity. You don't get to criticize the caste system after you take away the means through which it could have been eradicated, right? You take away the means through which the caste system could be eradicated and then say, oh, bro, you have untouchability, bro. You have this, bro. Like, shut the fuck up. You don't know how the caste system worked. And secondly, you had your own similar problems. No society was exempt from untouchability of the menial workers. And India didn't get the opportunity to provide menial workers with cleaner work methods. That's what it is. That is the summation of it.